motion in a second.
I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda at this time.
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda.
Have a second?
Second. I have a comment on the agenda. Item 2B, Mr. Antong Hungher is in attendance. He is the co-founder of the California League of Bond Oversight Committees. He's been involved in these oversight committees since the passage of Prop 39. He was not asked by myself to be a guest speaker. He didn't intend to be a guest speaker. He's going to be in the audience, and as subjects come up where there are debate, I'm sure he's going to have some insight for us.
Okay.
Okay.
So it sounds like, I can be wrong, but it sounds like he wants us to strike that. Is that from the agenda then? Is that correct?
As a guest speaker, yes.
Okay. So you would need a motion in a second.
Need a motion to strike his name from as a guest speaker?
Move to strike.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Any opposed?
I'm opposed. My motion for last minute meetings to have the minutes to reflect that we would have a discussion of the bylaws was not added to the agenda, and so I'm opposed to it for that fact.
Okay.
So I know at the last meeting, and I'm sorry if I interrupted you, but I know at the last meeting, our legal counsel made it very clear that those bylaws need to actually go before the governing board, the school board, and they are currently on the school board for July 20th.
Well, it sounds like you want to have a discussion about the bylaws.
No, sir, I'm just letting you know that that's where we were at. So that's what legal counsel advised us at the last COC meeting, sir.
Well, why did you ask at the end of the meeting if there was anything to be on this agenda other than your presentation
There's,
and the bylaws?
right, so the question was if there was anything else that was looking to be added. I know that you brought up the bylaws.
No, you said besides my presentation, being your presentation, and the bylaws, is there anything else?
Correct.
And there was silence. The motion, I agree, the motion wasn't finalized because the chair did not ask for the question. But it seemed at that point you were running the meeting, and there was no objection to putting them on this agenda. And I take exception that the chair arbitrarily takes things off the agenda that the members have approved, and no items should go on the agenda or come off of the agenda at the discretion of the chair. This is a committee of 7 people, and each person has an equal vote.
So we're a little off topic. We had...
No, we're talking about the agenda.
We're talking about striking a person's name off the agenda for tonight. That's where we're at right this second. So we had a vote. You were the only one that said
You
nay.
don't need to vote on that. That's
Okay.
gone.
Okay.
I took the exception of the agenda item that I requested last time to be on the agenda to be taken off. And that's why I'm voting no. You can go ahead and take your vote, and we'll press on.
Okay.
Before you take the vote, you need to take public comment. I asked to speak to this item, and you also have Rainier Riddle that wants to speak to this item.
Please.
You want to go, Rainier, or you want me to go?
Apparently, you didn't know that I was recording last meeting. I have the right under the Brown Act to record every meeting. And at the board, at that meeting, in 1 hour and 2 minutes and 58 seconds, Gary Riddle make a motion to include the bylaws on the proposed bylaws on the agenda, and Mr. Strong second the motion. And then discussion came from the public, and that was the time that the attorney said that it will be on the board will approve the agenda, and Mr. Khalid said we cannot have it on the board's July 20 meeting, and there was a lot of discussion, and nobody said we have a motion and a second for people to vote. And so the discussion, the motion was not voted on, but John, you are on the recorder, and I can put it here and you guys listen to it. Your question to the committee was, besides Mr. Riddle's bylaws, what else you guys want on the agenda? And then some other people added some more items on the agenda. So it was moved and seconded.
Thank you for your comment.
Good evening. Seems like this is going to be a learning experience for all of us. Speaking to Mr. Riddle's request to have his bylaws put on the agenda, it's nice that Mr. Calise or whoever decided to go to the board and ask them to look at the bylaws, but that's your decision. That's this board's decision to approve those or not approve them. And then after you approve them, then it could go to them if they wanted to look at it, but frankly, you're an independent committee, and they don't have any right to overrule you. But for them to pre-approve the bylaws, there's something wrong with that, because it takes away your independence. And so that aspect of this is wrong in the first place. You shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't be going to the board for their pre-approval of bylaws that haven't even been discussed by this group. Secondly, and the main reason that I wanted to speak was this committee is still not properly constituted. We've had numerous emails between Mr. Calise and myself. He's consulted the attorney. The attorney is being pig-headed and going ahead and saying this is a properly constituted committee. You do not have a member of a valid senior citizen organization. You don't have anybody representing the ARP or the AMAC or whatever. Mr. Riddle said he would, but frankly, there's a reason that there were 5 groups that were supposed to be represented by 5 different individuals, not to have one individual represent all 5 of those groups. And to go ahead with this as if the committee is validly put together is the wrong direction to go. Now, the attorney has said in her documentation at the last meeting that any citizen that pays on these bonds has the right to take you to court and stop you right there. And there won't be any more payments, period, until this is resolved. I don't particularly want to go in that direction, but if your attorney is going to give you bad advice and you're going to accept it, well, then everything's off the table at that point. And as you've seen, the SCTA does have an attorney and has sued the school district or done pre-litigation work saying that, what you're doing isn't right. So I think there's a pretty good chance that you should probably listen to me and get this committee up and fully staffed before we start taking actions, like approving bylaws, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Yes, sir. Please do.
Good evening. My name is George Gwynn. I'm the president of Solano County Taxpayers Association. And I'd like to remind you guys that you're supposed to be a watchdog for the public, the taxpayer, because pay for play is very big in the state. There are a lot of companies and individuals that go around trying to promote bonds and other things to make money for their business and themselves. And you don't need to be a lapdog for the people that are in government, because you're supposed to be oversight, and that's lost if you're not. And the other item that Mr. Saramello mentioned about the committee, we were promised certain things if we didn't oppose the school bond. And all those promises weren't originally forthcoming until we got an attorney to see that something was done in keeping with what we expected. For instance, the committee wasn't formed till way after the time limit that's allowed by the state law. And there was some money, I believe about $800,000 that was already up for spending before the committee was even formed. So I really think that you guys got off to a bad start, and I hope you can do what it takes to correct those kind of things, because if you don't, you can rest assured that the Solano County Taxpayers Association won't be pushing for any school bonds, and we won't even be neutral. We'll be on the opposite side. So I think that here's a chance for you guys to step forward and make sure that the district does the right thing, and then everybody will be happy. Otherwise, it's like Mr. Savarello mentioned, that lawyers get involved and things get ugly. So I hope that's not necessary. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your comment. Seeing no other public comment at this time, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as amended. Do
Move to adopt the agenda as amended.
I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So
I
adopted.
already stated my opposition.
Yes, sir.
So consent calendar, none, right?
So the consent calendar, we have nothing.
So would you like to move into the presentation?
Yes, I'd like to go ahead and move to agenda item A, district overview of existing bond projects,
Okay.
presented by John Calise.
So, good evening. At the last meeting...
Just a minute. When did
sorry.
we approve the minutes?
Did you skip the minutes? I didn't hear. I'm sorry.
You know what, I think I did.
Okay, so please just go back and,
I don't have them in front of me, so,
so the minutes were emailed?
yeah, I don't have them in front of me, but I can, even if you've got them there, Jack.
You have a copy of the minutes or not? Okay,
I have them right here. Need a copy?
Okay, so the members in attendance at this meeting: Jack Caldwell, Andrea Catt, Julie Mustard, Georgette Portier, Gary Riddle, Tad Smith, and myself, Robert Strong. District administration in place: Brian Dolan, John Calise, Rose Morales. Guests present: Lisa Alford, Esquire, Anderson Atkinson, Loya, Rood, and Rumo. So the welcome instructions: the Superintendent, Mr. Dolan, would like to thank everyone who filled the roles for the Citizen Oversight Committee. Mr. Calise will be the district liaison and is here to support the work the COC does. And we have the opening call to order. The meeting was called to order at 6:12 by Mr. Calise. Presentation of members: all were present. Review of procedures, policy, and guidelines, the Brown Act. Ms. Aldred from the firm Anderson, Loya, Rood, and Rumo presented information on committee composition and duties, as well as the Brown Act requirements. A handout was given to all present at the meeting. The purpose of the Citizen Oversight Committee is to inform the public concerning the expenditure of bond revenues, actively review and report on the proper expenditure of taxpayers' money for school construction, and advise the public as to whether a school district is in compliance with the requirement of Proposition 39. Mrs. Allred explained that the purpose of the Brown Act is to facilitate public participation in local government and to curb misuse of the democratic process by secret legislation by public bodies. All meetings of the legislative body of a local agency shall be open and public, and all persons shall be permitted to attend any meeting of the legislative body of a local agency except as otherwise provided in this chapter. She went on to explain that a majority of the members of the legislative body shall not, outside a meeting authorized by this chapter, use a series of communications of any kind directly or through intermediates to discuss, deliberate, or take action on any item of business that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body. The election of officers. Mr. Robert Strong nominated himself to be elected chairman, and second motion by Mr. Jack Caldwell and Mrs. Georgette Portier. Motion was passed with a unanimous vote. Mr. Tad Smith nominated himself for vice chairman, And second motion by Jack Caldwell. Motion was passed, unanimous vote. Motion was made by Robert Strong to elect a district representative to serve as secretary. Mr. Jack Caldwell seconded the motion. Motion was passed by unanimous vote. Public meeting. If next meeting would be held at City Chambers, who would be paying for the technical part of it? Mr. Calise responded by saying he would look into it. The district has a joint agreement with the city, but due to it being an independent committee, we may have to pay that. Future meetings. Mr. Robert Strong proposed next meeting for Wednesday, July 12th at 6:30 p.m. and at possibly the City Council chambers. At that meeting, it will be determined how many meetings they would like to have. Future agenda items, district overview of existing bond projects, overview to include project goals, project timeline, what has been done so far, project budget, contract issued to date. What is the district doing to save money and control cost? Public comment, online training for COC members at Cal Bach, bringing forth bylaws, existing contracts, timelines, and goals. Adjournment was at 7:44 p.m. I apologize for going past it. At this time, I will entertain a motion to accept the minutes as read.
Before you go to that, can I comment on this? On the minutes? Now that you've read the entire minutes, before you just go along and blindly pass this, you need to realize there's nothing on there about Gary Riddle requesting his bylaws. You're missing that in your minutes. There's nothing on there about any member of the public complaining about this committee being improperly constituted. Both of those things need to be on the agenda if they're, or on the minutes if that's going to be accurate, because those are things of concern that may come up later on, and they should be there. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
I think the chair was about ready to ask for any corrections to the minutes.
Are there any corrections for the minutes?
Yes, some of this has already been said. I will state it, and then I'll make sure I give a copy to the secretary so it gets corrected properly. Under future agenda, Gary Riddle made a motion to add the bylaws discussion to the agenda. The motion was seconded and by Robert Strong, chair. After some discussion, John Calise, district rep, asked if there were any additional items other than the bylaws and the committee that the committee wanted to be added to the agenda. There were no objections or additions from the members. Silence in this case indicates consent. I'd like that added to the minutes, to correct the minutes.
You can, so she's got it. and
Okay.
we're- And we are recording.
Okay.
So you can, at this point, you can.
So
make a
added?
motion. You can make a motion and have that.
So I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes as, do we have another public comment?
According to advised by attorney, you cannot have a district employee to be the secretary because that represents an employee being part of the committee. You need to select your own secretary from the committee, and the district provides the services for that. And so I will recommend that you elect your own secretary, take notes, and if I remember correctly, and I cannot remember her name, but at the last meeting, she asked that the minutes were presented to the committee before they come for approval on this agenda, and I don't know if the committee received the minutes before. No, the minutes were sent to the committee on Friday. That was required by the Brown Act. Your agenda needed to be posted on the website. It was not posted on the school district's website on Sunday, according to, and I have screenshots of that. So, I mean, you are violating the Brown Act right and left. And so, but that's a different issue. The issue now is you need to elect someone from the committee to be the secretary, and the school district will provide the services. You cannot have a school employee be part of the committee and a secretary is part of the committee.
Thank you. Ma'am?
In regard to the minutes, I, under public comment, did inquire about the CEQA process, and I didn't hear that that was included on the minutes.
I don't recall that. Would that have been under public comment that you? Okay. What's your name again?
Ginger Emerson.
Ginger Emerson.
I know. You know me.
Sir, did you have another thing you wanted to add? Yeah, I thought you were going to get up. Okay. With no other public comments, do I have a motion at this time to accept the minutes as amended?
Move to accept the minutes as amended, and that's my motion.
Do I have a second?
I will second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Minutes accepted. Seeing we have nothing for the consent calendar at this time, we're down to the district overview of existing bond projects from Mr. Calise.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, at the last meeting, the Oversight Committee did ask for an overview. So we put something together real quick just to go over that. Sorry. Okay, so what we heard you had asked for was to talk about Phase 1, which is Old Dixon High, the goals of the project, the timeline, the project timeline, any cost savings considerations or anything that the district is doing to actually try to save money on the project, contracts that have been approved to date, and then next steps. So the goals were to reopen Old Dixon High campus as a middle school. Sorry, this clicker is flying through. Create a healthy and safe environment that is conducive to learning. We have a campus that's sat empty for a decade, and it definitely needs some work. Open a facility that aligns with today's curriculum, and what that means is really bringing 6th grade into middle school, making it a 6-8 middle school, where we can offer science and other labs that are needed. Provide students with access to current technology, and I want to be really clear on this. We're not talking about buying computers or projectors or anything like that, but we're talking about infrastructure and backbone, and what we'll get to later in the presentation is you'll see we've actually, as one of our ways to actually save money, we're doing that not on the heels of the bond, but through other methods, so we will not be using bond dollars to pay for that. Preserve the district's current assets and real property. That goes to, this is a building that has sat empty for a decade, and it is definitely in disrepair. And at this point, we need to do something with it because we can't continue to let it sit in the condition that it's in. And then control costs and prevent waste, as with any project. So Old Dixon High School, there was a minor modernization in 2000, and it closed in 2007. The goal is to reopen it as a 6-8 middle school. We're looking to improve the campus to be student-ready. Remove the portable classrooms entirely, have all portables moved off of the site, and basically be able to produce college and career-ready program linked to DHS. So right now we have a really good 7-8 program, but the 6th graders do need that curriculum as well, that we just simply, we have limitations due to labs and things like that at the elementary schools. So part of what we did to save money right off the bat was we looked at doing an assessment prior to just going to a contract for modernization. We're not doing a full-on modernization of the school for several reasons, one of which is there were many modernizations made in 2000 that are still applicable, and then it was also a cost thing. So we got down to it, and we had our architects come in and do an assessment of what we would absolutely have to do to be code compliant and to bring it up to today's standards. That process involved district data collection, which is still going on, going back, finding old prints back dating to the 30s, to the original construction. Maintenance and operations was interviewed. That is really, really important. We have maintenance people on staff who serviced that building when it was operational, and the knowledge that they have is instrumental in reopening it. Site walk and assessment. And then assessment components, we looked at program functionality. Parking lot area drop-off is a huge consideration, and it's one of the primary considerations for the state, for the Division of State Architect. They're the governing authority who actually oversees this. Path of travel, that deals with ADA compliance and access. That is the very first thing that DSA actually will look at. Then we looked at deferred maintenance items, facility conditions, building code updates, accessibility issues, which is very similar to that of path of travel, health and life safety issues, fire water line, hydrants, basically fire life safety throughout the campus. Building system needs, that plays into not only technology systems, but also those fire life safety, the clock systems, the bell systems, but then even hardware, doors, things such as that nature. And then our technology needs. And technology, again, we're not talking about the computers on the desks, but the infrastructure and the electricity that actually supports them. So when we looked at our initial timeline had us February to September, which is what we're in right now, design construction documents, and then in September moving to DSA review. DSA is, the Division of the State Architect is very similar on a much grander scale, but for those of you who don't know, if you were to do something to your home, you would come to the city, file a permit, and if you're building a new home, they're going to do a plan check. It's the same thing, but it's done at the state level. The requirements for schools are much greater. Moving into March of next year, we would be doing what's called the back check, which is when DSA sends it back to the architect with any notes or corrections that they want to see. And then May and June, we would do the bidding and the award. And then July of 2018 to July of 2019, we would be looking at construction. Now, I think it's important to talk about, on the top of the slide, it says initial project timeline. And there's several factors that play in here. First of which is the delivery method that was originally chosen to bring the project in on time and on budget. There's some community concerns with that. So that being said, we're actually in a holding pattern right now, and we're working that out so that we can move forward. So that has actually delayed the project a little bit. The other thing that we've just learned is the Division of State Architect had just released a memo stating that now it is a minimum of 10 weeks before they will even allow you to make an appointment to submit your plans. So you have to be at 70% or 60%, I've checked with the architect, before you can request that appointment. Then in 10 weeks from there, they'll allow you to drop the plans in what they call their box. It's an electronic format. And then from there, they'll begin to review it. So at this point, we are several months behind by agencies that it has nothing to do, it's nothing that we can fix internally, unfortunately. There's outside factors playing into this. So cost savings considerations and methods, consideration of different delivery methods, we spoke about that. That was talked about a lot at the governing board meetings. There was actually a subcommittee that met on that and did a lot of work on this and looked at all of the different delivery methods and the pros and cons to each one, because they definitely all have their own pros and cons. Architectural project assessment prior to contract. That was huge, because if we went just off of a standard modernization, we saw actually that the architectural fees were going to be about 45 to 50% greater than what we're actually paying. So by having the assessment done, the architect actually learned that there was a lot of work that they would normally bid into their scope that was not needed. Use of energy grants to buy down HVAC replacement costs. You guys are actually getting a precursor to the board meeting on that. We have, I'll talk about this in our July 20th board meeting also, but the state had come out with a program several years ago, Proposition 39, which was the Clean Energy Jobs Act initiative. And with that, they actually allocated dollars to school districts, free money, to improve energy efficiency, and in doing so, to create jobs. We actually worked with a consultant and built a model of what it would look like today if Old Dixon High School were operating. And then with that, we can show them that by actually using those grant dollars to take care of HVAC needs and other needs at the campus, that we would actually by far exceed the savings to investment ratio that we have to do. Well, we actually just found out that they have approved that. So going forward, those are, the bond dollars are already very limited for this project. And what this is allowing us to do is use grant funds to pay for the HVAC as well as some of the lighting, which is on the next bullet here. And then we save those bond funds to pay for other things that are needed in this campus. So we're looking to save money anywhere we can. Reuse of existing building systems where applicable. That's really talking about things like doors, hardware, anything that's in place that we can reuse that's compliant with today's standards. We have every intention of doing so. Use of forced labor and DUSD construction services where possible. So if we were to go back several slides, there was a map that showed you the buildings that are being touched. One of the areas that's not being touched is what would be considered to be like the home ec room. And the home ec, that's not something that we're going to see in a middle school, but that's something that we do just because of where it is and because of the limited real property as far as brick and mortar classrooms that we have. That would be the ideal location for a staff lounge, which we do have to provide. So we can actually, because it's not part of the architect's contract, we can use our own in-house, what we call forced labor, to do that and be well within the legal limits of CUPCA based on the project size. But that's money now that we already have the talent, if you will, in-house to do this, and we don't have to contract that out. And then network, wired and wireless upgrades funded through E-rate. Mr. Monticello, I worked with him. He's our IT director. And there is a federal program known as E-rate out there, which is also grants. And from talking to him, it looks like we should be able to accomplish all of our network requirements there, funding that through E-rate, so that actually will not be on the back of the bond dollars as well. So when we get into the project budget, we did a quick, or what I have here for you is a quick analysis, and that is Old Dixon High School project. We have $13.5 million allocated for that. The furnishings budget for that school is about roughly $1.5 million. If we back that out, we're down to $12 million. Soft costs are typically running around, 30 to 33%. We're actually tracking right now to run soft costs right around that 25% range. Soft costs include everything from architects' fees to engineers to inspectors, basically anything that's not the actual construction or the construction materials. If we back out that 25% of $3 million, we're down to a $9 million budget. And where it says less building a roofing of 0.35, what that talks about is the architect is running the project for the initial timeline of construction to begin in July of 2018. We cannot allow the roof of A wing, the oldest wing of Old Dixon High, to wait until July of 2018. We have had a tremendous amount of vandalism to that roof where tiles are being ripped off that roof. We go up there and we find them broken and everything else. And there's several sections of the building where they might as well have not had a roof on them at all. So the reason that that's backed out, it will still be paid for out of bond funds because it's part of reopening Old Dixon High, but it'll be done as an initial project prior to the other construction. Oops, excuse me. So Old DHS proposed scope of work. So A, B, and C wings, which are our classroom wings, we're roughly at $6.6 million. The multipurpose room and the small gym is $500,000. The music building is $250,000. Large gym, we're at $0.6. The quad restroom building, which needs some major ADA upgrades, we're at $0.185. And then site development is $0.885. So that puts us at $9.015 million. And then the building A roof we have tentatively budgeted as $0.35, which puts us at an $8.665. So the takeaway from this really is that if you look at the proposed scope of work and the estimates that we're getting, not only from our architects and our in-house, but also from an estimating company, we're actually only about $100,000 off than what we projected several months ago when we built the scope. So that's really a positive thing. And then the Oversight Committee asked to know what contracts had been approved to date. So one of the initial contracts was a program management service contract with Cooperative Strategies. Program management services deals with, for lack of a better term, it's almost an owner's rep. It's someone or a company that will help us with a myriad of things, from everything from guiding the alphabet soup that we know as Sacramento. That's one of them. It's helping us try to work with, see if we can qualify for any facility hardship dollars, or at least facilitating that through specialty companies that do that. It's helping us with legacy closeouts. Legacy closeouts is a really big issue. In the past, DSA would issue permits, and the permit from 20 years prior may not have been closed out properly. And sometimes that was, there wasn't an inspection, sometimes it was a problem, or sometimes it was a lack of a signature. And now that DSA is fully automated and everything is online and they are able to track that, what we're finding is every school district up and down the state, to include Dixon, has a lot of legacy projects. So Dixon has, for Old Dixon High, I believe there's 4, and we are working with cooperative strategies to actually close out those legacy projects. So that's that contract, and it's rolling over 2 fiscal years. LPA is our architect. The first contract that you see of $40,622 was for the assessment. The second contract, the second is what it shows as estimated, which was part of the initial contract, but that's just for FY17 billing, and it's estimated because we haven't gotten the invoice yet. But that was $40,000, and then overall architectural design services is $865,000. So the breakdown of the LPA contracts is on the bottom of the assessment services, the architectural design services of $863, and then the scope amendment is $49,000, and the scope amendment shows as pending, and that's something that's going before the July 20th governing board meeting. What that is that's dealing with the roof, and the reason for that is what's up there right now, the clay tile. It's going to be incredibly expensive to replace, and longevity-wise, it's not worth it. So we're looking at actually changing the composition of that roof, changing the material, but the minute that you change the material, it has to go through architects and engineering services before DSA will even look at it. So,
John?
yes, sir.
Normally, I think of architect services as when we build something new, you get a design. Can you just briefly tell us what architectural work that this firm is doing?
Absolutely, yeah. So the very first thing that they look at is, as I said earlier, it's ADA and it's path of travel. DSA will not even look at plans coming into their office unless they're stamped and approved and basically drawn up by your architects and your engineers. So with that, a lot of the upgrades that are happening at Old Dixon High deal specifically with ADA and path of travel. Then there's also roofing issues. There's HVAC that will be part of this, even though we're paying with it through another medium, right? We're using grant dollars to pay for that. Everything from flooring. There's really nothing in this project that we can do other than maybe removing some countertops and things like that in the old home ec room without running it through, and the architects actually have to do a full design on it, and it has to go to design review for DSA. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yes, I had you have in your offices where you maintain all these construction contracts and A&E, architect.
So in my office as well as business services, yes, sir.
Okay. If we want to review any of those contracts, where would we preferably we go to your office or to business services?
Yeah, so you can go through my office, and what we can do is we can provide copies of those for you.
Okay.
Okay.
So, John, just a quick question.
Yes.
The architectural design services, that's including mechanical, electrical, plumbing. That's everything?
Yeah, so
in-house?
one of the reasons that we went with LPA for many reasons, but one of the big factors with them is all of their engineers are in-house.
Okay.
And that really played in when we went out for architectural services, you do an RFQ, a request for qualifications, because it's professional service, and then you do an RFP. And one of the things I'll talk about a little further in, but I'll bring it up now, is the architects work off of a sliding scale, and DSA actually used to publish this sliding scale for K-12 architecture. They've gotten out of that business just because they don't think it's appropriate, but all of the K-12 architects still use it. One of the advantages with LPA is using that same scale, but they have all of their engineers in-house, whereas any other architecture firm, chances are it would have been in addition to the architectural services contract that we would be paying for those engineers, everything from structural engineers to geotech to et cetera.
Okay.
Okay?
I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Thank you.
On LPA, are they based out of Sacramento?
So they have a Sacramento and an Irvine office. So they have a presence in both Northern and Southern California.
And do you have any idea of their workload at the current time?
So they do have a lot, but they also have dedicated project managers for each project, and we are getting the attention that we need. One of the things that we've done is, and I won't say that LPA would do this or wouldn't do it, because I wouldn't allow it to even happen, is sometimes what you see in school construction is you hear about this really long back check time from DSA, from when the time DSA sends it back, that it takes another year to get to it, And sometimes the reason that would happen is that the architects would get it and they have this tremendous workload and they would put it down at the bottom of the pile and they'd get there when they get there. So the very first meeting that we had with DSA, and I spoke with LPA prior, I made it known to LPA as well as the Division of State Architect folks that every meeting concerning Dixon Unified required my presence. And by doing that, that actually helps us ensure that while I don't think LPA would put us at the bottom of the pile, it helps us ensure that it doesn't. Because if I see that DSA is handing them stuff with 6 months worth of back check, that's legitimate to take 6 months. But if it's 2 months, it shouldn't take them a year to turn it around or so on and so forth. So we've really been strategic in working with them to make sure that that doesn't happen.
John, isn't that something that you would put in your request for proposal, that the people that the firms that submit a proposal for services, that they would be a timeline in which they could meet?
So they give us a timeline, but there are so many factors involved that they just simply can't control, whether those factors be, like I just mentioned about DSA pushing everything back 2.5 months, but also when architects give a proposal for a project like this, their proposal is based on construction budget typically and that sliding scale. So a lot of times they haven't even been through the sites yet. So it's really difficult to try to get a timeline. Now on a smaller project, if you're doing a small modernization or if you're doing a fire life safety project or something where they can walk the project ahead of time, absolutely that's something that we would include. For a modernization such as this, no, it's not part of the RFP. Okay?
And then I have one more question,
Yes.
John. I'm curious, the district's time, your time, anybody else's time as part of this project, is that funded by the bond, or is that
No.
something you're separated from?
No,
Okay,
I'm
just wanted to
paid out of the
confirm that.
general fund, and we actually made a commitment, and we put it in writing,
Okay.
that absolutely no administrator's salary would be paid out of the bond.
Okay.
And typically what you'll see is a lot of times school districts will hire project managers or directors of construction, so on and so forth, and pay for them out of bond dollars. We did not do that.
Okay.
So we are not paying for me out of the bond. Okay? So architectural fee schedule, this is the sliding scale that I talked to you guys a little bit about. The sliding scale is based on thresholds of 500,000 and then in the millions, and this is their fee and how they came up with it. So this is how they came up with their $863,000 fee. And then DSA, and I put this in here because I think it's important to talk about that while we're definitely controlling soft costs, and I showed you that we are tracking even soft costs right now at 25%, there's always the possibility of things happening. And this is just one, it's a perfect example. AB 111 was just passed. The governor signed it last month. And what that did is that increased our DSA filing fees or our permit fees, right? So for the first $1 million, we jumped from 0.7 to 1.25%. Not we, but anybody filing with DSA. And in excess of the first $1 million from 0.6 to 1.0. So right there with that, with the stroke of his pen, if you will, our DSA filing fees went up $55,000. So unfortunately, what they said is we've raised your fees by 1/3, which is what they've done here, plus we've slowed down your project by a minimum of 2.5 months. It's unfortunate, it's out of the district's control, but I do think that it's very important, and I'll talk about this at our board, the governing board meeting as well, but I want the committee to understand that these are the daily challenges that we are going to be faced with going through this or any other project. And then additional fees, and these play into soft costs. DSA approved IOR, and what that is an inspector of record that is required to be on the project at all times that there is construction going on. Material testing, analytical testing, that deals with asbestos, lead paint, anything that's potentially a hazard. Geotechnical test and survey. I don't anticipate having to have any geotech, which is earthwork done, but there is the possibility. One of the things that we've already identified is that the fire line that supports the old Dixon High is not large enough. So we have to work with the local water authority, or city of Dixon in this case, to work to actually open up the street, and we may need a geotech on that. Connection fees, there are fees that are associated with that. And then the A-wing roof replacement, which I've already called out for you.
Quick question on the analytical testing. There's before and after then is what you're saying.
No, so basically in public construction, unless you have evidence showing that it is not what we would call hot with lead or asbestos, we have to assume that it is. So anywhere that there's any work to be demoed or disturbed, we actually have to have testing done to see. If it comes back that it is asbestos, lead, or a myriad of other things, then we would have to have it abated. Now, what our records show is that the bulk of all asbestos has been abated from that school back in the 2000 modernization, but unfortunately they worded it as the bulk. So we don't know what that means, and I mean, digging further back we'll find it, but we will still have to retest because your tests are only valid for 3 years.
Okay.
Can you clarify again, is there a CEQA process as part of this project? Because I'm not seeing
Sure.
environmental services.
So, and that's in the bottom, it says this list is a reference only, it's not all inclusive, right? So, but there is. So under CEQA, if we looked at, we were advised that basically if you look at the requirements for CEQA as well as the exemptions for CEQA, because this is reopening of an existing site that the state does not consider closed because we do still use it, it was exempt. However, to meet some community concerns, we've actually committed to actually engaging in CEQA regarding traffic. So that is something else that will be paid out of this. And what CEQA is the California Environmental Quality Act. And what they'll come in, they'll do a traffic study, and then they'll actually, and for this particular project, CEQA can be a lot of different things, but the concern was traffic. And once the traffic study is done, they will actually make some determinations and some suggestions on how it's dealt with.
Okay, so is that the comment you made earlier that the project is kind of on hold?
No, that is actually not part of it, excuse me. So, because CEQA can actually, that can go on at the same time as construction. What that deals with is the delivery method that was chosen. And the delivery method, again, there were some community concerns.
Okay.
So we are working to actually get through that right now.
I will elaborate on those community concerns for the members that are interested. During the ballot formation process, the district made certain promises to the taxpayer organization that we would stay neutral on their bond issue, and one of them being that there would be competitive bidding. And when the leaseback proposal came about, we had an attorney work with us and the district, and there was, and John, you know very well what this is, they modified the leaseback so that the two top proposals would go to a competitive bid. So they had to redo the RFP to accommodate that. Is that stated correctly, John?
Yes. So what I would say is that one, I don't think there's actually been on any signatures on anything yet. So I don't want to talk about it too much. In all fairness, I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but because we're still in that settlement agreement. But what I will say is that the district made a promise to use a competitive method. Leaseback was a contentious item that the legislator fixed. And once it was fixed, the Dixon Unified School District upheld its word and shows what was still a competitive process. So I think I appreciate what you're saying, but I don't want to get too, I don't want to derail us and take us off track here either.
No, I don't. I just think it's important that this committee, we didn't get formed till 6 months after the election, and there were a lot of things happening during that time that this committee probably doesn't even know about. And I think it's important that they know the whole process from the beginning. And, I'm going to make sure that happens during this process. I think the chair commented to me that we wanted complete transparency and be responsive to the citizens. And
Absolutely.
that's where I'd like to see this committee go. And that's going to be the best thing that comes out of this for the district, particularly for any future bond issues where they need the support of the community. And I would just like to mention that the ballot argument in favor of Measure Q said award construction contracts through competitive bidding. And that became a promise to the people that voted,
Which
not just to be and placate the taxpayers or
and I agree with you.
organization.
And again, what I will say is that with what the legislator fixed with lease back, and that's a whole other discussion, but the district did uphold its agreement, and that's exactly what we were trying to do.
And I hope it works out good. This will be the first time that's been done in this type of contract, and those are becoming very popular, and some of them have gone very wrong.
They have, and it's unfortunate because what we only hear about is the ones that go wrong, right? And there's significantly more that go right. And these were things that the subcommittee of the board definitely took into consideration when choosing that delivery method. So again, I don't want to go too far into this. I appreciate your comment, and I agree. I want to be completely transparent. But Georgette, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Thank you.
One last question before you
Yes.
go on. I remember that the original Dixon High School was torn down because it was not safe in the event of an earthquake. Is there any retrofitting or earthquake strengthening being done as part of this project?
So no, the earthquake retrofitting that's in the building is sufficient. Now, one of the things that was talked about at our board meeting by the architect, I believe it was several board meetings back, was that if you exceed 50% of the valuation of the building in construction, so if they value the building at $20 million and our construction costs exceeds $10 million, it goes over by $1, then what we would be required to do is actually to re-retrofit the building to the 2017 or the 2018 standards, which is, at that point, you're better off building a new school. But as the engineers go through it, that is one of the things that they've looked at, and these buildings are fully Field Act compliant. And what Field Act compliance is basically saying that they are 100% safe from the structural standpoint to house students. It's everything else, the issues that we have right now, and that's why we're looking to modernize, to make them a safe place for our students and a place that's conducive to learning.
So the new middle school, when it's complete, will have earthquake standards based on the original high school?
No, I wouldn't go so far as to say the original. I believe there was some retrofitting done, and I would have to consult the engineers to tell you when, because that's a little bit beyond me. Okay, but be that as it may, the state still has a requirement for the Field Act. So if it was a 1939 standard, they're not going to say, it's Field Act compliant in 1939, we're good with that today. Because obviously what they considered to be safe in 1939 versus what we consider today is different. The difference is they might fall in line, and please, I want to be very clear in saying that these are arbitrary years that I'm throwing around, okay? But they might say, well, you know what, it had a 1974 retrofit, just as an arbitrary number, and that's definitely in line with what we consider to be safe today, based on the number of schools that are open. But if we exceed that 50% threshold, that's what triggers the today's standards. And again, If you go over those standards, you're cheaper at that point to build new. And a new middle school right now, you're looking at roughly anywhere from $45 to $60 million.
Thank you.
Okay.
John, I'd like to go back to the project budget analysis.
Okay.
My question is, I'm not seeing any contingency line item, and I'm not sure if that's part of each item.
Yeah, so they did build in a contingency of right about 18%, and it's included in the line items. And I say the architects and our estimating firm.
Okay, because, I'm concerned that with the timeline being pushed out, there's escalation costs and...
It's a big concern, escalation. You're 100% right. And right now what we're seeing is it is very difficult to get contractors to do any public works projects. And I know that you're familiar with that. Quite frankly, many of them don't want to do it. It's a lot more headaches. And at the end of the day, while the employees are making more, the owners of the companies are typically making less. So escalation is a big concern, and as we move further on and we can get past our delivery method challenges and we can get past the DSA holds up and everything, at that point in time, that's when we start going to bid and we start looking, and we might have to look at scope. Unfortunately, that's something that we can't control. We're trying to get this done quickly, not to ram it down anybody's throat, pardon the expression, but to control those escalation costs. Because while escalation costs typically contract, in past years you would use 2 to 4%. Right now, as you know, government agencies are considering by far a lot higher. Some are considering 10 and 15% escalation, and that's huge. We have a school district, a neighboring school district to us that's not our direct neighbor, but they're huge. And they it was roughly a $100 million project, and they had a handful of people even show up for the bid walk. Nobody is wanting to do these school projects right now. And the ones that are very delivery method specific because they're able to get the projects done quicker. Okay? So next steps, this is the last slide. The community concerns regarding delivery methods are addressed and the final delivery method is chosen. Whether that be the amended delivery method that Mr. Riddle was talking about or any other delivery methods, that still remains to be seen because there's no ink on the paper yet. Legacy projects have to be finalized and closed out. Those have to be 100% closed out prior to DSA issuing us our permits. Now, thankfully, some of those legacy projects do deal with the old portables that are out there. Those old portables are well beyond repair. So what that means is that while it's a shame that they're beyond repair and we'll have to get rid of them, we won't have to actually hire an architect or an engineer to come in and certify them because we can simply tell DSA we are removing them and guarantee the disposal of them because it would cost more to fix them than to get rid of them. So that helps us control our costs. Our pre-construction services contract would be awarded if applicable. And what that is, for those of you who don't know, pre-construction, that's dealing really with the architect during DSA and during the design phase, because a lot of times architects or engineers may design something that has no constructability, and that does happen. So it's really important that you have contractors in there and they have input in that process. Design and construction document completion, DSA submittal and back check, bidding award, and then construction. So with that, I will take any questions if anyone has any. Oops, sorry. Okay, thank you.
Okay, agenda item B was stricken, so we're on to agenda item.
Public comment on A.
Okay.
I know the purpose of the committee is to look at the expenditures and to certify whether they're appropriate or not. And I see that we spent $800,000 or we've contracted for that amount, whether it's been expended or not yet, I don't know. My question is, this board should be asking, what other firms bid? What was the competition? Did we just simply go out and hire LPA? I think that's necessary because, that's one of your actual things that you're supposed to be doing is looking at that to determine whether it was spent correctly or not. I mean, you may have other firms out there that bid much higher, much lower, I don't know. I mean, we're just looking at it now and saying, well, this is what was spent. Well, what was the process to select this firm? That's what I would like to know. Maybe Mr. Calise can answer that.
I can definitely answer that. As we talked about earlier, with architectural services, the very first thing that happens is an RFQ. It's a professional service. What that is a request for qualification. That went out. We narrowed it down to several firms, I believe to 5, and this is going back a while, so I'm hoping my memory serves me correctly. But I think we wound up interviewing 5 firms. And then from there, we actually did a second round of interviews. We brought it down to 2 firms. And we brought it down to 2 firms knowing that we would have multiple projects. We approved those as potentially, right, the district's architects based on the RFPs. And then the RFPs came back, the request for proposals, and that's when it talked about the dollars. And the reason that we go through that process is it's really important to determine who is qualified based on the scope of the project and not based on price alone. While price is incredibly important, and that is what drives a lot of our decisions, this plays into even when we talk about delivery methods, you don't always necessarily want to just give something to the cheapest bidder, and that's why there's different methods out there. And that's why for the architect, it goes through the RFQ process first and then the RFP. So does that answer your question, sir?
So do you have the figures as to what the other bids were?
In front of me, no, I don't.
I mean, do you remember approximately, were they within $100,000?
Yeah, everybody uses that sliding scale for the, and I say everybody, and I'm talking about the world of K-12 architecture. They all pretty much go off of that sliding scale. The difference is when you get into firms that don't have in-house engineers, and that is a very big portion of it, they're giving you a $863,000 number based off of a sliding scale, but then you may see several $100,000 in engineering costs as well. So all of the numbers, though, from what I'm remembering, and I think it was almost 2 years ago or a year and a half ago that we started looking for architects just to gear up towards this process. I believe all of the numbers were really, really close.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon again. Can I assume that PLA's project labor agreements are not going to be part of this program so far?
I'm sorry. Can you?
Project labor agreements.
Yes.
Can I assume that they're not going to be part of this project?
They shouldn't be, but that's something that I think a lot of that deals with how we actually deliver this project. So, trying to think of the best way to explain it. So with the delivery method, if we choose to go with lease back, and either way, if you're talking about the project labor agreements that deal with apprenticeship and whatnot,
yes.
So that's state-driven now.
Well,
so I'm not sure I'm understanding your question.
Okay,
100%.
Project labor agreements basically exclude competition.
No. I understand what that means, but
Yeah.
So we're talking about 2 very different things because the state has these project labor agreements right now that deal with actually apprenticeship and apprenticeship numbers on the job.
Okay.
So no, we will not be excluding competition. Where you could see that is if a design build method was chosen. There's design bid build and there's design build. Okay. Design build is when you hire the architect who is also a general contractor and you give him that one contract for what you're talking about, and that excludes all competition. We're not using that.
Because what's happened in Fairfield and in Solano County in general is that contractors that aren't union contractors won't bid because they have to pay the same fees that the union does.
Right, they have to pay prevailing wage.
Well, it's not prevailing wage, it's the benefits, and they don't get equal treatment.
Yeah,
So-
well, it's part of that package, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, we're not, we would get into that, not we, the district, right?
Okay.
But a district would get into that if they chose that design-build process. That is not the way that we're going. Now, there are certain things where design-build works. This is not one of them.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that because it's not good for the taxpayer because
No,
the
that
cost goes
eliminates
up.
competition.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
absolutely right, sir.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Yes.
I have a question for John. I can ask the school board, but I don't know if I can be at the school board meeting on the 20th. The resolution that the school approved and was put on the ballot stated and promised that they're going to put percentage of general fund money for the maintenance of the schools.
That is correct.
I look at the budget of the school district, I don't know if they approve it or not, and I didn't see any maintenance on the budget. So do you know if the school district is planning to wait until the school construction is finished and
No,
then?
we've already done it. It's already done. If you look at the budget line that you're looking for is RRMA, which
Okay.
is routine maintenance account.
Okay.
And that has the $1 million allocated to it, that commitment was made, and it is there.
Okay, so I think it was about 3%, wasn't it? I
Yeah,
don't
it's
remember.
actually just over 3%.
Okay, okay.
When it used to be, when it was governed by the state, it used to be that you had to put 3% in, and the state actually used to throw some dollars in there as well. That went away in 2007 with the economy when it crashed, but we made the commitment to that 3%, but I think the way that it was worded, and we would have to go back and watch the tape, and I'm aging myself saying tape, but I think the way that it was worded was it was roughly $1 million, and I believe what Mr. Dolan said is roughly $1 million, and that's what we'll be contributing. So yes, there
Okay.
was $1 million
Okay.
for the 17-18 fiscal year. There is $1 million allocation in the RMA budget.
Okay, and that's only for this project, no?
No, that's routine maintenance. That's district-wide. That's us.
Okay.
Does that make sense? We're actually exceeding that 3%, but we are honoring that, and we have every intention to. The district does not want to see, and I'm speaking for the district here, and I might be a little bit out of turn in doing so. It might be better for the board to say this, but I feel comfortable in telling you that the district has learned, unfortunately, if you don't take care of your buildings, this is what happens. Look across the street, right? And that's no one's fault. The economy really played into this, but nobody wants to see us go down that road again. So from this point, at least in the last 3 years that I've been here, I will tell you that we are really focused on maintaining our buildings and trying to keep what we have good and improve what's bad and make it a little bit better.
Well, this is the district's history because my kids were in the high school back in the 80s.
Okay.
And they never had any maintenance for anything. That's what happened to the Dixon High School. So, but I thought under the impression that 3% maintenance fees was going to be for this specific building, the specific project. So I have to go and look back the resolution.
So I am quite sure that it is for the routine maintenance account for the district.
Okay.
As the person who is over maintenance, I would totally support that, but unfortunately our budget would not. So, but 3%, I will tell you, is fair in what we need to actually keep our maintenance and to keep operational and keep our buildings maintained.
Well, I think originally we asked 6%, and it was a discussion between the taxpayers and Mr. Dolan, and we
I
got...
wasn't privy to the conversation,
Yeah,
but
no,
I know
it
there was
was
some
it was
conversation.
private meetings. Yeah, you were not there then.
Yes.
Okay, but George DiPaolo was, so...
Yes, he was.
Any other public comment for agenda item A? Okay, as B was stricken, I guess we're on to item C. Citizen Oversight Committee report. Content, frequency, and delivery method. Gary?
Okay, I wanted this on the agenda because really what we're here for, the ultimate goal to this committee, is the report that we send to the citizens. If it wasn't for that one thing, there would be no purpose of this committee. So, that is the ultimate goal. And as we know and should know, Prop 39 was presented to the voters by means of reducing the 2/3 vote requirement for new debt, specifically for school bonds. The irony is that only a simple majority was required to pass Prop 39. Regardless, to pass Prop 39, the voters were promised that all bonds passed would have an independent Citizens Bond Oversight Committee to report to the public. a requirement for an annual performance and financial audit. And the Bond Oversight Committee would receive and review each copy of the audit. If I may, I would like for each member on this committee to state in their own words their understanding of the importance of the committee's role in providing the report to the public.
Well, I will start that.
Good.
In my opinion, this committee's responsibility is to ensure by the rule of the measure how the funds are being spent. You know, it's to look at it, to make sure that it's legal, that's the way it's presented, and provide that transparency to the public. You know, we don't set the policy, but we enforce the policies that have been set, right? I mean, there's a certain set of rules and guidelines that, for this committee, that have been set forth, and how these bond monies are supposed to be spent. If we find a problem, then we report the problem. If we don't find a problem, we still report that we haven't found a problem. That's my understanding.
And it was very clear that the money is to be spent on modernization of our schools and infrastructure improvement, as John explained, and no money is to be diverted to paying administrative costs, salaries of teachers, or other employees of the school district.
I agreed with what they said. I mean, basically, that is the purpose of the committee, is to make sure that the bond funds are being used for the purpose of the new construction or modernization, making sure that money is not being, that's why I asked the question about not just John's time, but the district's time in pursuing any RFQs or any work associated with this project, to make sure that that is not money, that we're not using the bond monies for that. So.
So pretty much in agreement with what's been said. So just restated a bit. Observe that the bond funds are spent according to the required process, emphasis on observe, and then as appropriate, report and update on that process, to our community.
Yeah, that's basically what I was going to add too, that, I mean, it leads to the report to the public, that what we have looked at and talked about, then we report back.
In hopes that we can get more people in attendance to hear it.
Yeah.
You did some of that with the board meetings. You traveled to various school sites and had the Tremont Band perform one night to get all the parents there, and then go through a slideshow like this. Need to be more people, parents here.
One thing I'd like to add is, I think we also owe it to the citizens of Dixon to make sure that we look at this objectively, without any bias from any previous experiences, and we're fair. Again, if we see a problem, we report the problem. If we don't see a problem, we don't create one. We report what we find, and that we do so in a fair and non-biased way.
Well, it sounds like everybody knows what the objective is. I guess the most important thing about the report is how we reach that objective, and that should be an important topic probably for our next meeting, to come to an agreement just how we're going to write a report with both positive and negative findings that we have supported by actual verification. I trust you, John. You do a good job. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to look at to verify.
No, and like I told you when we spoke, I invite you to, please.
Okay.
So, but thank you.
So I've got a little advantage on you because I prepared my, I prepared what I have to say, and, you know, I want everybody to know just how I do feel about it. The Prop 39 requirements for performance and financial audit and an independent bond oversight committee to report to the citizens was to provide assurance to the public that their property tax assessment would be spent wisely and only for the purposes cited in the bond measure. When each of us became members of this committee, we also committed to the Prop 39 statutory authority and the responsibility to the citizens, promising that their tax dollars would be properly spent. Producing accurate reporting to the citizens is our role and the most important responsibility we have. We cannot truthfully write a report that contains either compliments or criticism regarding the Measure Q funds without verifying the validity of our findings. Otherwise, they are just opinions, not based upon fact. I would also like at our next meeting to, for everybody to think a little bit and come with a proposal to establish a mission statement that sort of capsulizes what our major objective is. And I think we need to have that on our website, which I believe is going to be the next subject. Anyway, that's all I have on that subject tonight.
Can I add something to the report? We're in the Citizens Oversight Committee report. I'd like to get a copy of any documents that, you know, pertaining to this project, whether it's the RFQ, the RFPs, the scoping, you know, just estimates, anything, and I think it should be shared with everybody, whether you provide it to us at the next meeting or what. So that way there's something for us to kind of start looking at. I mean, we've been given just an overview as to where we're at, what we've spent, but, you know, I'm sure everybody would say the same thing, that it's better for us to.
Are
really
you wanting that to include any bids that didn't get one or didn't get?
I'd like to see the entire solicitation process. I mean, everything from not just the architects and not just, you know, whatever you've already have contracts to date. I'd also like to see just the scope of the project and the assessment that was done, any documents pertaining to this project from the beginning when we started procuring any services. You know, any money that we've spent so far from the bond, basically, I'd like to know where those are going to. So if maybe we can bring the documents to us at the next meeting.
And I would like to request that we schedule a time to actually get a tour of the old Dixon High. I appreciate your presentation, but I think it would be helpful for folks to actually see firsthand the condition of the school and go through it building by building to get an understanding of how the money is going to be spent. Because I'm particularly interested in staying on the timeline, because I would very much like to see my child have the opportunity to attend a modern and nice middle school.
So if I may to that one, a tour, it may be a video tour, and there's two things there. One, I need to check with our insurance as far as bringing you guys through the building. We do have a lot of hazards in place right now. The other is there is certain areas of A-wing that, due to the major roof leaks, we have some mold growth. So there are health concerns. So even if insurance does buy off on that, there may be some areas that are off limits, and I just want to be on record as saying that. So I'm not opposed to bringing you through by any means, but depending on what North Bay, our carrier, says, it might be something. And if we do, I'll take you through on a full video tour and something along those lines. Different oversight committees are doing this, and school districts are working with oversight committees to give the committee the tour any way they can. I know when we went to the CalBOC training, Washington Unified talked about that. And, to talk about the roofs that were done and the HVAC units that were done, the COC wanted to see it. So they used the drone and they did a video tour. So if I can't get you in there in person, we'll definitely do a video one. And would you like that prior to the next meeting, or what are you looking for?
I was just requesting it be scheduled, as soon as possible.
Sure.
Whether that's before the next meeting or not, I don't have a strong opinion.
Okay. So
John,
I will look into that.
John, was it like 2 years ago that we did that walk of all the schools?
It is.
If you still have access to those photos and everything, not a whole lot maybe has changed. At least we could,
Oh, no, we have all of that. We definitely do. And, we did that walk as a subcommittee, and I will tell you that from my own experience, right, as someone who I've received some risk management certifications and whatnot, and had I thought as a risk manager, it was actually 3 years ago that we did that, had I been thinking like a risk manager 3 years ago then, I probably would have advised Superintendent Dolan that we did not walk through that site because of the condition of it. So it's really just about, one, making sure that we keep everyone safe, right? There's nothing to hide. But two, that we keep the risk for the district down because we don't want to have any problems. But, yeah. So we do still have lots of photos, and we did a lot of new photos with the facility assessment with the architect as well.
Gary, do you have any more to add on your item?
Well, we did talk about the frequency, and my only comment on that is that everybody knows we are required to do an annual report. The question is, do we want to do, and we probably don't have to decide that at this time, but we can do interim reports. I know the last bond oversight committee that I was on here with this district, we did do interim reports, and anything in those reports would be consolidated into the annual report. If there's nothing to report, there's no report, but the interim ones would just be probably, that would be just as needed, would be my recommendation. But I think that's probably for a future discussion.
And just so you know, I think when we spoke on this, and I apologize, but I think we put action. I don't know that this is an action item, and please correct me if I'm wrong. So that may be inappropriate to be there, and if it is, you may want to strike that. So are you looking for action today, Gary, or?
Well, I didn't ask for action on this, but when I saw it, I actually prepared a proposed mission statement to go along with that, which would encapsulize the total idea of our responsibility to the report. And I think that could be done at the next meeting and give other members an opportunity to draft something of their own, since this is a committee of 7, and get more good ideas, and maybe we can just come up with a good mission statement to put on our website.
Great. So, and I just want to, go on record and tell you that when Robert talked to me about this, it sounded like an action item, and that's what I thought it was. And I'll apologize, because I will, I want to stand up here, I want to sit up here and make it clear. This is the first time that I've run a committee like this, where we are under Brown Act and so on and so forth. So, unfortunately, there's some mistakes that I might make along the way as well, and I'm going to do my best that I don't. But that was really more on me from when Robert explained to me what you were looking to do. So I apologize for that. So thank you.
No apology needed.
I just have a question. I know we're supposed to provide an annual report, but what time period are we looking at? I mean, when is the annual report due? Is what I was trying to get at.
My understanding, and I may be completely wrong, but my understanding is that's really a decision for the committee.
Yeah,
of
that was my understanding.
When you will release that report.
Well,
and Gary, you sat on the last one, you said, correct?
Yeah, the ideal time to have that, you're doing certain things, you have things you want to put in your report, and then we get the annual audit. And then we look at the audit, and that should also be included in the report. So I think the annual report would coincide with receiving and reviewing and putting things in that the auditor reported. Because with a report to the citizens without the independent audit, is not a complete report.
And do they do that audit the same time as the financial audit?
You know what? Honestly, I don't know. That's something that I would have to ask our finance people, whether that be our CBO, our in-house, or our consulting. And I apologize if you can ask me all the questions about facilities, and while I definitely know some about finance, I don't pretend to be the subject matter expert. So I would have to find out for you on that.
And another, just one simple question. What's the fiscal year for the district?
The fiscal year for the district is July 1 to June 30. So we actually just began our new fiscal year.
Okay.
Is there any public comment on agenda item C?
Whatever she wanted to see as the committee, I think it will be a good idea to be put on the website, because maybe there are citizens out there that they're interested to see, and rest assured there are quite a bit that I know. As a matter of fact, I got several phone calls asking if this meeting tonight was televised. And
Which it is.
yeah, but it's not on the on the internet.
So it's not on, and I think let me answer your first question first.
Okay.
Okay, about the website. We're actually going to go into that in, I believe it's item D.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that, but I have absolutely no problem publishing documents on our website, and that's why I wanted to talk about actual content of that website. I know what the district wants to put up there, really in the interest of being transparent, but I want to hear what the committee is looking for on that as well.
Everything she asks is public records,
Right.
and
No,
any
no, no.
citizens come during business hours and request to review them. So it's not something that the district is doing, and I think to gain trust and, people need to see more than what is provided. And I'm not saying anything about the district because I haven't done much with the district, but I can tell you about the city, so,
Understand.
Okay.
So I have no issues whatsoever with that being up there, and we'll talk about that on agenda item D.
Okay.
But part of our program management services with Cooperative Strategies is they're actually building that website, and I just have to backfeed them as far as some of the additional content that we'll be adding in addition to documentation and scope and everything that Georgette was talking about. But they'll be building that website, and we will link it through the district's website.
So I don't have to get up again and say, I think the suggestion that you can give them is to one click, they can get to the website.
You do
Instead,
not
you
have to get up
go-
again for that, no. So, and as far as to answer your other, that it's not on there, so I think you're talking about Granicus?
Yes.
So Granicus, the district is actually piggyback onto the city on Granicus.
Yes.
I can't, so from talking to Superintendent Dolan, it sounds like we can't piggyback a committee onto the district, onto the city. That being said, I'll talk to him a little more. I will talk to the city. But either way, we are recording these, and what we'll be doing is, while this website is being built, in the interim, we will take these videos and we will actually link them in through the district's website. So you'll be able to go into a section of the district's website and actually review the video.
Okay.
Okay, but
Okay.
it also is on local cable live, so for all the millions of viewers that we have at home.
I didn't know, people know how to watch the council meetings and the school board meetings, but nobody knew how to watch this meeting.
It's still on the
And they
cable.
called me and I didn't know, tell them, go there and you see it, because I wasn't, I wasn't sure.
So my understanding from talking to the technician is it's still actually streaming live on that cable, the cable channel. I think it's 20 maybe?
Yes.
So yeah, it is still. So for our millions of viewers at home, they are sitting right now watching it with their families.
Oh, I'm sure they are.
Oh. Thank you, Irene.
I don't have enough. We'll share this, and I think I'll go down the
I'll
line.
take a picture of it.
Okay, good.
Any other public comment on this item? Seeing as there's none, we'll move on to agenda item D.
So agenda item D is just, you got a brief taste of that real quick. So it's talking about the Citizens Oversight Committee website. So we're having that built for the COC. And with that, there's a lot of regulatory things that are on there that our financial or our annual reports will be on there. But then, in the interest of transparency, we will put up there really very similar to what I've been through today with our presentation as far as the goals and what we're looking to do, but then also make available public record through that as well.
John?
Yes, sir.
I've been busy, so I started a little list, and I have a list of things, and we can kind of build on that or discuss them. And I made copies. I don't have enough for each and every person, but I think if we share them, you don't mind sharing with Jack.
While he's passing those out, a quick question for you. Do we have an approximate timeline of when that'll be ready?
I don't, but I can call them and find out. So part of it was just really waiting till we got to this point.
Okay.
To see what was going to be on there and what was needed. But I will find out. Okay, thank you. Right, so providing the URL link, and I'm sorry, I think it might actually be more appropriate for Robert to talk about that, but that was what Arania asked about,
Yeah.
and that will be done.
Yeah, as you can see, the last 5 items are required by the Ed Code, so they definitely be in there. Agendas, minutes, copies of reports to the citizens, maybe the 2 annual audits, and copies of any documents received by this committee. And the others are just above, or my suggestions. I think we should have the Measure Q ballot statement in, a mission statement when we adopt one, our bylaws, if there are any, and I would like to see the list of our members. I know a lot of committees, you can't see who's on their committee. I don't think there's any reason to hide our names. And the project list, that's something we didn't talk about tonight, I don't think.
No, it was in the bond, it was on the bond language, but you're right, it wasn't, and you know what, honestly, it was just an oversight when I built the presentation, didn't think to include it, but we can definitely list that on.
Because that's one of our responsibilities as a committee, to make sure that those items that were on the list are what we'll spend money on.
Right, that we're not spending it on different projects, absolutely.
Right. So we will have our own, we'll be able to go to the home page and go down, it'll say Bond Oversight Committee, and we can click on that and go to the...
Yes, and what Mr. Strong asked while you were passing it out, I don't know if you heard him, but he asked if we had a timeline for that, and I don't, I'm sorry, but I will talk to actually Cooperative Strategies to put that timeline together, and that's something that I can email out to the COC as an information item, so you know when that's coming.
That makes it very handy for people without, making all these copies and trying to remember where everything is. And, you get something like that, you can go right to a tablet and get all the information you need, background information. Okay.
Any other public comment on this item? Okay, hearing none, we'll move down to reports of officers and subcommittees, which we have none. Reports of special committee, we have none. Since we moved the public comment up earlier in the agenda, we're down to unfinished business and general orders. There are none. Well, we had moved it up earlier, but
That's not on the agenda, that's what I'm talking about.
that, that's what Mr. Chairmello had asked to move up. That's what we,
You can still open it up.
go ahead.
Good evening once again, George Gwynn. Question again about CEQA. John, you mentioned that it was going to be concerned with traffic. Is that going to be the limit of it, is traffic at this
So
point?
that was the, from what I remember, we can go back and look at the board meeting, but from what I remember, that was the only concern that was brought forth with CEQA. It was never I don't believe it was ever the intention of the board, and I'm not going to speak for the board, but I don't believe it was ever the intention of the board to engage in a full EIR, which is an environmental impact review.
Okay, if we limit it to traffic, then if it turns out that the report says the traffic is going to be a disaster, say the roads are F, or I forget what the lowest level is, but some of the roads can be really bad sometimes. Is that still going to be acceptable as far as CEQA is concerned?
So what they would look for then, the consultant, the environmental consultant who does that, their job in this, or their role in this, wouldn't necessarily be to figure out a way to change the roads or the routes, right? That's obviously well beyond what the school district can do, but they may look at different things such as staggered start times, different bell times, suggested different routes, may work with the city to change the traffic pattern and, all of that. So what that what that environmental consultant would recommend would really drive that, but ultimately we can't change the roads.
But you try to mitigate it to the best of your ability.
Absolutely, and that's what, when we talked about this, when we talked about CEQA, the board talked about, hey, look, we'll consider staggered start times and all of that, but I get it that's the board saying that they're going to try that, whereas if there is a CEQA, or at least a partial CEQA analysis done, and that's put in writing, well then, you know what, that's what we're going to do. So yes.
Okay, thank you. The secretary taking the minutes, is that going to be where you guys have the final say, or is that going to be coming from the district? I hope you guys have the final say in the minutes, because otherwise that kind of restricts your function considerably.
We'll get to that in our conversation.
Okay, good. Okay, and also I have a suggestion. You have 7 members, but you don't have a senior citizen committee member. I believe Mr. Riddle belongs to a group that might qualify, and I was thinking if that's the case, then maybe he could be the representative for that, and his wife, Urania, could be the taxpayer representative. Anyway, that's a suggestion.
Okay, thank you.
And number 3, the Brown Act. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it or not. There's a website called bigbadbonds.com. And anyway, the person that made that website had this one person that made comments that knows quite a bit about these kind of matters, mentioned that the legal people tried to push, when they were trying to promote the district side, that the Brown Act applies to you guys. You guys have the First Amendment rights to say whatever you want to say, and that's in the best interest of the public to do so. Well, anyway, this particular article, which you might want to take a look at on the Big Bad Bond site, states that this kind of committee is really not a Brown Act committee, because the lawyers try to use that to structure what you guys can do and limit what you can do to really help the taxpayer. So anyway, I would suggest you guys read that particular article, because I think I have some good ideas for you.
Thank you.
And the next thing I have is, why shouldn't the accredited interest on CABs, that's, can't think of the term now for the abbreviation, count against the bond, capital appreciation bonds, I'm sorry, should count against the bond authorization amount. And for the chair, under what authority did you change the agenda for the meeting this last time?
I don't understand what your question. Under what authority did I change the agenda?
It was my understanding there was a change in the agenda from what was talked about in the meeting. Am I correct about that, Gary?
Yeah, we went over that when I introduced the correction to the minutes regarding the bylaw discussion.
So we're okay now?
Well, we amended the last minutes, but...
Are you referring to this agenda here tonight that we took a vote on?
Yes.
Okay, so there was no individual authority. I mean, we had a motion, it was seconded, it was voted on, so I guess I don't understand.
Oh, okay, well, no, I'll skip that then. I'll
Okay.
go on to another one. Thank you. Secretary, is secretary going to be from the school district, or is it going to be,
That's something we're going to have to discuss.
okay, it's still under discussion. What's the authority that a committee uses to elect a non-member?
I don't have the answer to that question.
Okay. And district employees are prohibited from being members of the committee, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, good. Who does the secretary answer to, the superintendent of the committee?
The secretary for this meeting?
Yes.
Would answer to us.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. And you guys are aware that any communication you have should be transparent as far as emails or...
Any majority. So if Gary and I have a discussion, if it's not a majority, it's not a quorum, it's not a backdoor meeting.
Yeah,
so to
that's what
speak.
I'm saying. You don't have hidden secret meetings, that's what I'm
Correct.
saying. Okay.
You are correct.
Okay, because that's one of the things that's very important for this kind of
We went
Yes,
through all
sir.
that
station.
training
I
at the
appreciate
last-
that. So I guess that's about it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your comments. You have any other public comment at this time? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Anton Young here. I'm the co-founder of the California League of Bond Oversight Committees. I want to tell you how impressed I was with your meeting tonight. I thought your presentation, John, was outstanding. I thought your willingness to accommodate the requests from the committee and the comprehensive of your presentation was outstanding. I want to compliment you on that. As has been expressed already, this is an independent Citizens Bond Oversight Committee established under state law. And that committee is required. This is not an advisory committee to the school district. This is an independent advisory committee who works for the citizens. The district got the benefit of a 55% vote rather than the 2/3 vote. The district had the option of going for a 55% vote or a 2/3 vote, but they elected a 55% vote. And with the 55% vote, you get a Citizens Bond Oversight Committee who oversees the expenditures of the funds and reports those expenditures to the community. So that's what we're doing tonight. It distressed me when I read the application to become a member of this Dixon Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. On that application, there's a certification by the applicant. And that certification says, and I'll quote, "I hereby certify that I've received the procedures, policies, and guidelines of the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee and understand and acknowledge that the sole purpose is to inform, etc., etc." I would submit that that certification is inappropriate and possibly illegal. Because first of all, as I understand it, there are no procedures that anyone could have looked at. Secondly, I think it's inappropriate for the district to require members of this committee, as part of their application process, to certify that they will follow the rules established by the school board. I think that's inappropriate, improper, and in my view, illegal. In regards to the bylaws, I think it would be unconscionable to have the school board adopt on July 20th the bylaws for this independent bond oversight committee. I think that's inappropriate, possibly illegal. How can you have an independent bond oversight committee established under Ed Code when the school board is going to approve your bylaws? Think about it. Not only do you have to certify to become a member that you're going to follow the rules, which haven't been established, now the school board is going to establish the rules after the fact that you're going to be required to follow. In regards to the minutes, in your minutes that you approved tonight, you state, and I quote, "A handout was given to all present." That handout is not part of your minutes. I think your minutes are incomplete. If you have a handout and you reference it in your minutes, I think it's appropriate and proper that that be attached to your minutes so the citizens understand what was done at that meeting. In regards to the secretary, I think it's inappropriate for a member of the staff to be the secretary of this committee. I think the committee is entitled to have their own secretary who is responsible to the committee, selected by the committee. I think under the Ed Code, the staff is obligated to provide administrative support to this committee, and I think it's appropriate for the staff to provide draft notes and minutes to the committee secretary, who then presents those to the committee. Those minutes should go out well in advance of the meeting, as required under the Brown Act, so that folks can have a chance to look at them. In my view, the Brown Act restricts the work of this committee. I've gotten a legal opinion from the West Contra Costa County School District that says CBOCs are not required to follow the Brown Act. CBOCs are not required to follow the Brown Act. What the Brown Act does is restricts you, in my view, from doing your work. Because if you have over 3 people who talk outside of the meeting, that's a violation of the Brown Act. Now, the Ed Code requires that your meetings be posted and notice be given consistent with the requirements of the school district. So by not following the Brown Act, you don't give up any notice to the public. But what you do give up is the ability for you to do your work. And many school districts want you to follow the Brown Act so that you will have that restriction, that you can't talk outside of the meeting, because that's a violation of the Brown Act. So I would suggest that you consider not having in your bylaws a requirement that you follow the Brown Act. And finally, I would suggest that you consider having your own independent legal counsel. I've given Mr. Riddle a copy of the agreement that we have in West Contra Costa Unified School District with legal counsel. Legal counsel for our CBOC reports to the CBOC, is paid for by the district, and that legal counsel has attorney-client privileges with the CBOC. Right now, you're getting legal advice from the school district legal counsel. That, in my view, is not independent legal advice. Getting legal advice from the body that you are overseeing as an independent bond oversight committee is not independent legal advice, in my opinion. I think you should seriously consider having your own attorney who can advise you on terms of Brown Act, can advise you in terms of bylaws and other matters that you may need advice on.
Thank you for your comments, sir. Mr. Charmello?
Wow. All I can say is I think you guys are starting off in the right direction. The only thing that worries me is the suggestions that we've made so far seem to be being ignored. You've heard that the problems with the secretary. I think Mr. Jung here made a great point about the district's attorney. I think she has led you down the wrong path because, as I say, this committee is not properly constituted, and she maintains that it is. That is enough, in my viewpoint, to fire her from her position. If she doesn't even know that, I do not have the documentation to verify what Mr. Jungherr said about not following the Brown Act. I understand his logic, but the Brown Act has protections for the public and its participation, and I would think that it would be important to have some of those rules in place. He says that some things are there already in the Ed Code and whatever else, and that's fine. And I also understand his point that it would be good if you guys could get together and talk about things, but it robs the public of the right to hear what those conversations are, how you're coming to conclusions. And so therefore, I think that might be a direction that I don't want to see this committee go. As far as what Mr. Gwynn was saying earlier about the authorization for changing the agenda, I think I could cut to the chase on that. I would simply say, who is in charge of creating the agenda? And I believe Mr. Calise probably is the one that created this last agenda because you didn't do it, Mr. Strong.
True.
And in that case, it's very important that Mr. Calise understands he's not running these meetings, you're running these meetings. He is here to provide assistance, and I understand the vernacular of the day or the jargon is that it appears that you're running things, and I don't believe that you think you're in that position, but that's the word you used. The fact of the matter is that when a member requests something to be put on the agenda, it needs to be put on the agenda. And I'm not going to repeat all the other things that have been said here, but I think the final proof of this committee's validity and independence is going to be how you listen to the comments that are presented to you and what actions you take. Don't just simply sit there and nod your heads and then come back in a couple of weeks or whatever and say, okay, we're going to go on, and we've just forgotten all about this stuff. I think it's very important for public confidence that you're responsive to what's being given to you. I will say as a final comment that I'm very impressed with the quality of the comments that are coming from this committee so far, that your concerns and what you want to do. I think a tour is a valid thing to ask for. I'm very happy that you asked for the RFQs and the RFPs. I think that's very important to make sure that answers the questions that I brought up earlier. And that's what this committee is supposed to be doing. I shouldn't have to be doing it from the outside. And so I think you're on the right track, and I wish you well, and hopefully everything goes well, and I will be at the 20th board meeting to voice my concerns to the board, because the board, I was at the start of the last one of these bond oversight committee things, and it was horrendous. The chair was nominated so quickly by the group that I like to call the bad old boys that I could see that it wasn't going to be an independent committee, and they had no idea of who they were even supposed to report to. They had it in their head that they were supposed to report to the school board. That is not your purpose. Your purpose is to report to the citizens, not to the city, to the citizens, the people that are funding this. And that's
Absolutely.
the important thing, whether you do it on a yearly basis, whether you do it on a quarterly basis to say, here's an update, that's all fine. That's up to you to do. But, like I say, I don't want to see a sham committee like the last one was. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Have any other public comments at this time? Seeing as none, Unfinished business and general orders, we have none. Under new business, I have to set dates and times for future meetings. And for that, we have information, discussion, and an action. Before we get into that, if I may interject, since we're talking about future meetings, I would entertain a motion for us to elect a person from this committee to be at the 20th board meeting.
I am happy to attend.
Okay, so I think we need to make a motion, right? And then, so do I have a motion to select a member from the committee?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second, yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Any discussion?
Is there any discussion on it?
Yeah, there's discussion. I'd like to know what that person is going to, what their purpose of going to that meeting is.
It's been said that the district is going to draft bylaws for this committee. I cannot say that we shouldn't have somebody there. If somebody's going to tell us, these are the guidelines that we want you to review and accept as your bylaws to perform by, well, we need to have somebody there as they're discussing it. We need to have an elected representative from this board at that meeting.
We need a representative that's going to stand up in front of that board and say, we have our own bylaws, we'll present our own bylaws, and if you want to look at them and question anything there, and you're welcome to make suggestions, fine, but there are bylaws as long as we're not documenting anything illegal. And if the person you select to go there is not going to say that, I'm going to be there and I will say that I may be the rogue committee member, but I'm not going to ever accept that because it's wrong.
Okay?
And the sooner this committee gets understanding of our position, the better off we're going to be. You're going to have the committee answering to somebody outside this committee on what should be in our report to the citizens. That'll be next. In which case, there's going to have to be an independent report in addition to this committee. So you can take your vote, do what you want.
Sir?
I totally agree with Mr. Riddle, and I'll try to come to that meeting, and I'll also try to get as many people as I can get to attend and support Mr. Riddle's position. I think that if you guys start off with not being firm with the school board, this whole committee is going to be a colossal waste of time because you're just going to be a rubber stamp. So I hope you keep that in mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment.
It's normally the chair's responsibility to be the representative. At least that's the way it's worked with every committee I've ever seen in the city.
I'm going to be there.
Well, that would be fine.
Yeah,
I'm just
I mean,
saying.
I'm giving
just saying
everybody else
that's-
the option of an elected representative.
And that's fine too.
So, as opposed to making it appear as a dictatorship for me just going there
Right.
without giving them the option.
I think,
And I don't want that
I think
appearance.
the more individuals that attend this, I know Ms. Mustard will probably be there because she is involved with the school district. So you've got probably at least 3 or 4 that are coming. Why don't you all just go? Thank you.
Can I ask a question, though? Did we get clear definition when we left that last meeting? I wasn't clear that, I thought we were going back like to the lawyer to decide if the bylaws were to be determined by the school board or...
Let me,
Because they're not, it's not a definitive thing that's happening on the 20th. They're just, wasn't it, my understanding that it was going to be a draft proposal for us then to review and approve, so it's not something that's going to be set in stone after that meeting.
Right, you're asking me,
That's-
correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry.
what the lawyer was very clear with, and I'm not going to argue, right? I'm going to say that as a district employee, I have to follow the advice of counsel. The attorney was very clear that the board had to approve the bylaws. But what was going what is going before the board at the July 20th meeting is draft bylaws. And those bylaws will be discussed in open session by the board. And with that, that's where the COC would definitely have the opportunity, and this is again coming from our attorney, to actually stand up and discuss that with the board, and so that the board can make changes, right, to work with the COC is where I would imagine they would be, right, so that they can approve bylaws that then would be acceptable to the COC as well.
Will those draft bylaws be on the web before the 20th?
Oh, yeah. So the posting goes up usually, so our board meetings are on a Thursday night.
Yeah.
Typically speaking, we usually post the agenda the Thursday or Friday before.
Are other districts' COCs bylaws approved by the school board?
So according to our legal counsel, yes. So I haven't polled individual districts, if that's what you're asking. I have not. But going based off of that, according to counsel, yes.
I would be interested in seeing that.
I think you're going to get a no on that.
And that's very possible, again, and I want to be very clear in saying that I'm not going to argue it one way or another. I'm just, I have a responsibility, I just want to finish, I have a responsibility to follow the advice of counsel, and that's
Yeah,
it
you work for the
school
district, you're not
Correct.
part of this committee. We have a responsibility in this committee, and we can choose to decide whether we're going to listen to the district legal counsel or the people who know.
Oh, I agree with you, sir. The question was asked of where the district was coming from.
And this
that's
is
all.
one of the people that know right here, Mr. Juncker.
Anton Young here. Your statement is incorrect. Many CBOCs adopt their own bylaws. I think the process that you're suggesting, as I understand it, is there's going to be draft bylaws on the agenda of the 20th for approval by the school district. They're going to ask if you have any comments. There'll be no opportunity for the CBOC as an entity to be involved in that discussion. You'll be discussing it as individual members because they are going to then adopt those bylaws, as I understand what John said, on the 20th.
Well, I don't think it would be a fair assumption to say that they will adopt those bylaws. And again, I'm not going to speak for the board, but what I would say is that if the Citizens Oversight Committee has concerns with those bylaws.
Well, then I've seen them, so.
Understand. If the Citizens Oversight Committee has concerns with those bylaws and they bring that to the board, knowing the way that my board operates, typically what I would see is that they're not going to approve that. And again, I cannot speak for the board. I don't sit on the board. But there's a possibility that they can approve them. But there's also a possibility that they can say, we actually want these to go to the COC first.
All right, what I would suggest, because this is such a monkey process, I would suggest that this CBOC have a special meeting next Monday when they have the proposed bylaws in front of them so they can take an action that then the chair can present to the committee, the board, on Wednesday as an action of this group. I think that's the only fair way to do it, because the way it's doing now, it sounds like this is being railroaded through.
Yeah, as a committee member, I'm not comfortable having the school board discuss the bylaws when this committee hasn't even come to a consensus of our 7 members.
And as the chair, I can tell you that if they hand us a set of bylaws that they want us to follow, okay. They've only handed a person a set of bylaws they want us to follow. That doesn't mean they've been adapted. That doesn't mean they've been approved. This CBOC will sit there and go through whatever we're given and discuss whether we want to approve it, change it, disapprove it, whatever we want to do. I think that's the general consensus of everybody up here. We're not just going to take something and say okay because it was handed to us.
Consensus requires 7 members to agree.
Right, and we'll be all in agreement before any of that goes forward, I would think.
Well, when are we going to discuss what we want as bylaws? After we're given some?
That's where we're at now, at the
See,
next
we've
meeting,
got the
and that's what we
cart-
discuss.
We've got the cart before the horse. I'm sorry.
But just because...
We should be going to the, if the school board wants to see our bylaws and make suggestions, fine. We should adopt our own.
And on that point, just because the board has adopted a set of bylaws for us, doesn't mean that we've adopted those bylaws, correct? As an independent committee, we need to adopt those bylaws also. They're not adopting them. They can't adopt them for us. They don't have the authority to adopt them for us, do they?
They don't have the authority to
So it's more
bylaws
of a...
for us. And that's why I wonder why there's been resistance to working and doing our own bylaws. This is something that should have got done the first minute. We need to be moving on doing the work that we need to do. We're wasting time, and we don't have procedures. I don't even know, or do we follow Robert's rules? Or we follow Robert Strong's rules? I don't know. I'm a little confused. If we don't want to have bylaws, we don't have to. There's nothing that requires it. We can say we don't want bylaws at all. But we need to have at least a simple page of how we're going to conduct our meetings, what parliamentary procedure that we're going to follow, how we're going to handle agenda items, and specifically the parts of the Brown Act that we will follow, which is the main purpose of the Brown Act is the people's right to know. And that's really the gist of the part of the Brown Act that we need to adopt. And if we can do on a one sheet of paper some very simple rules, and maybe we need to think about that this next meeting and get that done, and everybody think about it before that meeting, and then we go to the school board and say, here are our operating policies. We don't want or need any bylaws.
I don't see a problem with that. Does anybody else on the committee see a problem with that?
No.
Again, my thought process was whatever the committee gives us is not going to be,
The board, yeah.
whatever the board, thank you, whatever the board gives us isn't going to be our rule set unless we all seven sat here and said it was. But we need time to, like you said, create our own or modify theirs, whatever we do. But it's got to be what we all agree on.
Can the agenda item on the 20th be discussion and not action?
So according to, again, this is the district's answer on this would be, according to legal counsel, is that it's an action item.
Okay.
But it's important to point out that it's not solely action. It's information, discussion, and action. So, and that was what I was talking about a moment ago when I said that if the board hears from the COC, and again, I'm not going to speak for the board, but if the board hears from the COC loud and clear that what they just talked about and discussed in open session is not acceptable to the COC. Keep in mind, the board is elected officials. I can't imagine that anybody on that board would say, oh, well, let's do it anyway. I'm not going to speak for the governing board, but I'm going to tell you that I don't anticipate that would happen. So I think the point is that if legal counsel for the district has said to put it on the agenda item as an action item, but I think to agree with Mr. Strong, I think it is very important, based on everything that I'm hearing here this evening, that you are represented and that you do have the opportunity to weigh in on that.
John, can you refresh my memory? What was the urgency that the school board wanted to have that action item on the agenda for the 20th?
It's just a matter of having the bylaws completed, sir.
It doesn't slow down any of these steps of the...
So, you know what, honestly, I don't know. I would have to ask our counsel, because again, this is part of that learning piece. There's nothing in the statute that says that you have to have bylaws. So based on that, I wouldn't imagine that it would slow the process down, but I would have to double check that to give you an answer.
I wish they would have been as adamant about the requirement in the education code that this committee be formed within 60 days of the certification of the ballot measure.
And I can't speak to that other than to say that has been addressed.
I'm just commenting, John.
Okay.
I know your position and what you do, and I don't have a problem with that. But the thing is, there was no urgency to get this committee going, but there was a big urgency to get the bond money, a big urgency to do all these things, and this committee is here to look at those things. That's what we're here for. My bringing those bylaws in was, and I stated that very clearly, so I'm not going to state it again, is to get the busy work out of the way, have some structure for this committee, so we get on and do the important. There's a lot of work to do, and it's not fun work. I don't know if, looking through contracts and expenses and things is, that's not easy work, but that's what we got to do if we're going to prepare a valid report to the citizens.
So, Mr. Chair, what I would suggest is on the 20th, when the school board has their meeting, it's their meeting. It's their agenda. So let them propose, discuss, accept, approve, and that's all fine. That's their prerogative, okay? And then as we go to set our next agenda, I would like to see included on that agenda a review of what they come up with, if they come up with anything, and then we'll decide if we would like to form some of their parts into our proposed bylaws, so on and so forth. But if it is in fact correct that we make the final determination whether or not we have bylaws, and if we have bylaws, what those bylaws will be, then the school board is just simply handing us, should we even agree to accept that, something that we can use in creating our product. What Mr. Riddle has already worked on is, again, something that can be used in creating our product, if we choose to create it and if we choose to adopt it and follow it. So I think the cart before the horse comment that's a good comment, but realistically, let's wait and see what happens.
Well,
if we're truly in control, we don't have to be concerned about what hasn't happened yet.
So would you like to rescind your motion to elect a single person, as I think it's clear we're pretty much all going to be at that meeting?
Sure, I'd be more than happy to rescind that motion.
Well, in the sake of time, it might be advisable that this committee recommends that the school board not review potential bylaws for this committee. Based on the fact we've only had 2 meetings, we have not come to an agreement, and we still have more work to do. I would rather be more proactive and submit our bylaws to the school board rather than having the school board submit a draft to us.
I can only agree with you on that.
Can I make a comment on this?
Sure.
Just to remind you, at the last meeting, the attorney said, the school district has to approve your bylaws. That's what she said. Now, you've heard Mr. Calise any number of times say, I have to defer to the attorney, to our legal counsel. This is going to come down to whether you've got the big cojones to say, no, we're not going to agree with you. We're not going to do what your counsel is suggesting because it's wrong. That's what this is really going to come down to. And I appreciate what Tad has said, that this is something that you should be presenting to them, and just saying, this is it. You don't have a choice in this. This is what we're doing. We don't need your approval, period. That's the whole point of this.
So, understood. So
Yes.
as they have the prerogative to discuss, present, and agendize their own items, so do we. We certainly can hand them a document, if you want to call it that, for their consideration. And that's all fine.
I'm not arguing with you on that.
No, I'm not arguing with you either. But one last thing, Mike, is that what's true is true. So if it's true that they have no bearing on our decision whether or not to have bylaws, that's important to know.
But see, this is in response to what Ms. Kett brought up.
I understand that.
Do they have the ability to force you to do this? And it's
Do they?
going to come. Yes, because their counsel
Does
and
this
their
gentleman
staff,
agree?
Just wait a second. Their staff is telling you that you're going to have to abide by the council's decision. their legal counsel, that is, not the city council, but the council. It's going to come down, somewhere down the line here, for you to exert your independence by saying, no, we're not going to go along with what your council is saying. The council said that it was within the Brown Act that the school district had to give approval to this. It's nowhere in the Brown Act. That doesn't even cover what this is about. This woman is giving you false information. She made a presentation on the Brown Act, and she doesn't even know the Brown Act, other than the basics.
So, and I appreciate that, Mike.
And that's
good.
This is not a debate. This is my comment, and all I'm saying is you need to be careful because staff, Mr. Calise, is of the impression that what council says is the truth, and this is what has to be done. She told you that when you do bylaws, it's going to have to come back in front of the board for their approval. You should have told her right at that point, no, it doesn't, and we're not going to do it. We're not going to submit it to them. We're going to adopt it here, and that's the end of it. If you don't like it, sue us. That's the end of my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to defer back to the chair because you're the one that's really chairing this meeting, but thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Sir?
May I speak?
Yes.
Anton Younger. I thought your suggestion is excellent. What I think you should do is tonight agree on a letter that you can send to the school board tomorrow that expresses your sentiment on this issue. That way they have that letter in front of them before they consider any action or discussion that they have on the 20th. You make your position clear. Then, by having it consensus or majority vote or however you want to decide tonight, it'll have a lot more impact, I believe, on the 20th than just having individual members standing up and commenting.
Thank you for your comment. Board, anybody have any comments on this?
Well, I agree, and I think the committee may be ready to accept exactly what has been recommended. And I think Tad is on the right track, too.
Yes, we don't have to get into a fuss with the school board. We're a new committee. We haven't completed our homework assignment of studying the issues pertaining to the bylaws. It's too early for this, and we would prefer to work on our own set, get approval from the school board for our bylaws. And I'm happy to work with Robert to, get a letter issued.
Do I have a motion to draft a letter for the school board for their 20th meeting?
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion?
As long as we get a opportunity to add or change that letter, it should be a committee letter, and I think we should all sign it.
Can we all communicate with each other on that? Are there any violations there?
That'd have to be open to the public for us to do that.
Well, the final document would be
So-
presented to the public through that school board meeting.
Yep. Yes, sir.
You can't do what you're just suggesting and follow the Brown Act. That's called a serial meeting. Because what's going to be in the letter wasn't agreed to here. It wasn't in a public setting. I would suggest you take 2 minutes and you write the letter together now, the exact language, and you agree to it. Otherwise, you're going to be accused of violating the Brown Act. Because what you're going to do is you're going to all opine on this after the meeting tonight. So any of your critics are going to say, you guys violated the Brown Act in preparing that letter.
Makes sense. Yes, ma'am.
I think what Todd said was perfect. Can you repeat it? Or if not, they're taping this meeting, and the committee can say we agree to whatever.
Yes, it was a very simple statement.
Okay.
That our committee has only had 2 meetings.
Hang on.
We are not prepared at this time to submit our proposed bylaws. We would appreciate an opportunity to have time to draft our own bylaws and submit them to the school board.
Would you like to write that?
We have it on tape. I think.
Would you like to write
Yes,
that letter
I'm happy
here
to.
as suggested? So we're not,
Give me a few minutes. I will see if I can write it in readable longhand.
Write it on
Do
here.
that, or you can write it as a subcommittee, if everyone agrees with the content, and just putting that out there so you know.
Okay.
The other option that you have is you can write it as a subcommittee of 2, if you don't want to violate the Brown Act, and then if you want your entire committee to review that, you could actually call a special meeting to review it prior to it going to the school board. Those are all your options. You guys do whichever you prefer.
did you all hear that? That we have an option to form a subcommittee of 2 to draft a letter?
Yeah. That's why sometimes they have subcommittees, because
So do we,
Can I nominate Tad and Gary to write that
do
letter?
we have to do a motion to form a subcommittee before we form a subcommittee?
Why not?
I don't know.
So, Julie, you were going to make a motion to do that?
Sure, I'll make a motion to create a subcommittee.
Okay,
second?
and I'll second that.
Any discussion?
Yeah, so with that said, we are well within, we're staying in our lane as far as the Brown Act is concerned
We're in
by
compliance
having a
with the Brown Act.
subcommittee, and then you 2 gentlemen work together to develop what you're going to develop, and then send it or present it to the school board, and then that covers all the bases.
Do we have to have a special meeting to approve that letter?
That's really up to you guys. If the committee, my understanding of it is that if the committee wants to elect a subcommittee to write and present that letter, they can do so, or they can bring it back under a special meeting for full committee approval.
Or could we attend that meeting and then comment on it?
Yeah, if you call a special meeting, so the only way that you can have a meeting with the entire committee would be to actually agendize it 72 hours notice, which technically, 72 hours notice as a regular meeting, or you can call it as a special meeting with 24 hours notice. So the options, what I had said to Mr. Strong was that it sounds like you guys have a few options. It sounds like you guys can actually write that letter now. I don't know if there's a Brown Act violation there, though, to be honest with you, because it is not on the agenda. I'm not sure. Your second option would be to form a subcommittee and have the subcommittee write it and present it. Your third option would be to form a subcommittee, have the subcommittee write it, and then bring it back to your committee under a special meeting prior to the board meeting. So it's really, I think it comes down to the latter 2, but it's a matter of, do you want to, and again, this is your decision, not mine, but do you want to have them write the letter and not have the opportunity to review it, or would you like the opportunity to review it? Because if you would, you need to review that in a public forum.
Yes, sir.
The subcommittee cannot speak for the committee. So the timing is short. I believe what you stated, sir, was a sense of the committee. It's on tape. I suggest you go with that. If there's a Brown Act violation, the way you cure a Brown Act violation is you come back and do it over again at a subsequent meeting. Period. That's how you cure a Brown Act violation. So I suggest, it seemed to me you had agreement on what was presented. It's on tape. Do it tonight, and you're done.
Thoughts?
The only thing I would take out of what you said is we would appreciate, because you're asking for permission.
Fine. I was just trying to be polite.
That's the parent in me.
Okay.
Do we want to amend the motion, or do we want to leave it as is? The motion was to elect a subcommittee.
Or do we just finish it now?
Okay, so all in favor of a subcommittee? Say aye or,
Aye.
Aye.
Do we know who's on the
not yet, that's next.
Oh, okay.
Any opposed? Okay, we have a subcommittee. So you volunteered to be on the subcommittee?
Sure.
Okay, do we have a second volunteer?
I nominate Gary.
Yeah, I'll help with those 3 sentences.
Okay, it looks like you and Gary.
I trust you.
Wonderful.
Okay, do we want to have a special meeting to approve this, or do we go into the assumption that it is going to be what we all understand it's going to be right now? And let them do it without the special meeting?
Trust you.
I'm going to be gone.
I mean, speaking for myself, I'm satisfied that the subcommittee will deliver something that is agreeable to all of us.
Agreed. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, my name's Michael Nolan. Wasn't going to comment, but I was a parliamentarian in high school. And what the
You were a
committee-
what in high school? I'm sorry.
A parliamentarian
Okay.
for the student body. I think what the whole committee can do is make a motion to instruct the subcommittee to say to convey the thoughts of the member here to the school board. And then you can include that in your letter. The subcommittee's been instructed to make these points for the school board's consideration. That's all. It's one way of getting the sense of the entire committee, but then the subcommittee is drafting the letter under the instruction of the full amount of the full members. And I think you could do that tonight. That's my point.
Thank you for your comment. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so I think we're pretty much there.
Okay, yeah, I agree.
And also just one more time, we've had a lot of conversation. I think the intent of this instruction is that at this time, we're not prepared to present our proposed bylaws. That's the message that we want to make sure we deliver to the school board.
So I'll entertain a motion to instruct the subcommittee to inform the school district.
So I'll make that motion to have a subcommittee instruct the school board of our position at this time regarding the bylaws that
Do I have a second?
I second.
Do we have any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. For our next meeting, is there any suggestions, thoughts, when we should have our next meeting? We want to meet bi-monthly? Do we want to meet quarterly?
I would suggest quarterly, but that's just my suggestion.
That would put us into October. I would tend to agree with you, with the exception of
When we get
this thing with the bylaws. I think that's,
And I agree too. So maybe our ultimate goal is to have quarterly meetings,
Yeah.
but with everything that's going on right now, maybe we need something a little more timely for this period.
And then to review all the information Georgette asked for also.
yes.
Yeah, we're behind the power curve because we got started late. There's a to catch up by the end of the year when we do an annual report, we'll still be looking at things that happened 3 months before that, and we won't get a report out on time. So we probably, and again, if it's nice that things are brought and the whole committee looks at things. We can have subcommittees to look at specific things too. We can do it that way.
Absolutely.
So, there's bond oversight committees that are these big school districts, and I think Mr. Young has about 15 over in Contra Costa County or so. They have a lot of members because they have big bond issues and a lot of work there, and it's a lot of work for a small group of people. So we're going to have to do some catch-up.
Do we want to set then our next meeting for a month from now, perhaps August 9th, which would be roughly about a month from now?
You know, that sounds reasonable, and then also we got to remember that, thank you so much, John, for arranging this venue for us. I think
Thank you.
this was wonderful. And then, of course, that's going to dictate our meeting date to some extent as to when this is available.
So Wednesdays are available, except I guess one Wednesday every 2 months is my understanding, I believe it is, that the TAC meets, that the traffic advisory. I will say that as far as your next meeting date goes, it sounds like you'd like me to bring the information that you've requested from me. The 9th that week I'm not available, and I'm sorry, I can do the 16th. And you guys can hold your meeting, but I cannot be here on the week of the 9th to actually give you the presentation. So if you'd like to meet for your bylaws and everything, that's fine, but I would not be able to bring to you everything that you've asked for.
Well, I was actually hoping that it won't be provided at the next meeting, if it can be provided sooner on the website, like, I don't know how long the website will
I don't have
take.
the answer on that. I'll
Okay.
get you the answer on that.
At least a
So-
temporary, that's all I'm asking. I mean, I don't really want to wait.
No, understandable, but and that's my point, is if you're looking for a presentation with all of it, I wouldn't be available the week of the 9th.
That's the first day of school, too.
Correct.
Should we move to the 16th? Anybody have any thoughts?
I won't be able to attend that one, but
I'll be on
It's only one
vacation
person.
at that time, but I mean, that's just one person.
And you may do
That's
the
two.
9th, I just can't be here to give you a presentation.
How about August 2nd?
I'm gone.
I'm actually gone, but I don't think
I'm gone, too.
I'm sorry. Does it have to be on a Wednesday? I mean,
So for this venue,
For this
we
venue.
can try to work another day for this venue, but for the purposes of trying to set your meeting this evening, it may be difficult because I don't have the city calendar.
if you're not here on August 9th, there's somebody else from the district that will be representing if we have questions?
If you have questions, yes, but depending on what those questions are would dictate whether or not they can answer them.
What about the 23rd?
I'm
No.
for me.
I'm gone.
The only Wednesday I can give you, and again, it's your meeting, the only Wednesday that I can give you in August is the 16th, and I'm sorry.
Are we locked in on Wednesday night? I mean,
Just only if we need to know, we would have to go, we wouldn't be able to set the meeting date, and we would have to go back to the city to see if this venue is available.
You know what, I can do the 16th. I don't know if anybody else had it.
I won't be here, but that's just one person, so.
Okay.
Want to do that?
I'm okay with the 16th. How many people will not be here for the 16th?
I won't be here.
We'd be down one person.
Just fine, I'll catch up.
And FaceTime you in.
So we'd still have enough for a quorum.
Yes.
So, do I have a motion to make that meeting August 16th, same time, 6:30 PM?
I'll make that motion.
Do I have a second?
I second it.
Do we have any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? All right, so moved.
Are we going to, would we talk now about what we would want on that agenda? If there were any additional items?
Yes, we can do that.
Or just, I don't know if it needs to even be on the agenda, but it's been referred to a couple of times what the Solano taxpayers were committed to, or what the district committed to. I'd just like to see what those items were, so that they wouldn't oppose the bondage. Do you have that, Gary?
well, if you,
Can't give it to her.
they're listed in the what do you call it, argument for?
Okay.
Didn't you help write that?
I can go back and pull it out. I just wanted to see that specific list.
I'm having a little trouble, I put it away, yeah. Here it is. The first one was award construction contracts through competitive bid, prioritize projects which was done, I believe. Structure bond maturity consistent with projected useful life. Control soft cost and use non-bond funds for facility maintenance. And we discussed that before. I think those were the only, there seems to be something else I forgot, it's not here.
I believe there was a commitment made, or I know there was a commitment made from the district concerning the RRMA that your wife had asked about as far as the routine maintenance dollars.
Yeah,
That was part of something that was brought forth by the Solano County Taxpayers Association as well. I'm sorry, Irani, I can't hear you.
The 5 or 6 points were part of the resolution that you submitted to the county to put the Measure Q on the ballot.
That is correct. Yes, so, and that's, depending on how the committee wants to see that, we can bring that forth, the district can bring back that agreement, just in the form of even a presentation if you'd like, so that way it's available to the public, whatever the committee wants.
So the other thing I think it needs to be on the agenda, past documents that you've asked for,
Correct,
to be able to review those.
correct.
And of course, the bylaws are going to have to be on the agenda. I think at this point, we all know that.
And I believe a selection of a secretary, I mean, it's been.
Yes,
noted
selection of
many
secretary
times.
will need to be on there as well.
It was brought up about the positions, and, that was bad advice we got for me to be in 2 different positions because there's supposed to be a person for each of the designated positions. But that is the authority and responsibility of the school board. So I think this is probably going to take a discussion with the superintendent to get it on the board's members, but I guess we need to agree where we're going to go on forward. But it's not really our decision. It's their decision. They've selected a committee, and now they're going to have to make some changes to the designation for that resolution they're going to do. So, and I think George Gwynn is already going to, I think he's already discussed that with the superintendent, so that may be something we don't need to discuss.
Do we want to have it on the agenda and strike it if we don't need it?
Probably have it on there for an information if they've made it. This will be after the school board's next meeting?
Yes.
So if he has that resolution, is he going to have that resolution passed to this next meeting of the composition of this board? They don't have a resolution as of day establishing this committee. They're going to do that in the next board meeting, correct?
As far as I know, yeah.
Yeah, so that resolution probably needs to come back here as information.
Okay.
Not that it's going to change anybody here, but might create another position, possibly.
So resolution discussion, okay.
Yeah.
That I asked for, it's on the website. It's all under that little Measure Q. The argument in favor, argument against, all that information's out there, so.
Yeah, perfect.
Do you may have anything else you'd like to see on the agenda?
I think it'd be a very short item, but what I suggested before, that we do a short mission statement, everybody brings some thoughts, and we do that, I think would be a good idea. Get us all on the same track.
Whose car is that?
And maybe some further discussion on our work as far as ideas about how we're going to validate our data.
So how we will validate our data?
Yeah, how are we going to, that we report, if we report something, if we put it in our report, we should be assured that what we're saying in the report is accurate. And so if we don't go beyond this type of meeting where we're looking at data fed to us, we've really not validated anything. So we can't really comment. We can say John gave a great presentation, which he did, but we can't attest to the accuracy of it.
Right. Okay.
And then we'd get an update about the website, so then we know we can move forward as far as communicating with the public and the process, like you talked about, getting information onto the website and stuff. We should know by then, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and for that, we probably need to review Gary's list of items that he wanted on that website, make sure we're comfortable with that.
So review list of items provided by Gary
So
for website.
If I may on that, I think Gary's list of items, there's a lot of things that the district, let me rephrase, there's a lot of things that Ed Code says that we have to put on that website, and they're listed. And I think everything that Gary has asked for, I will go so far as to say that I don't think that there's anything that's inappropriate. So I think moving forward and trying to get our website built, what I would ask that this committee consider tonight is that you actually go, so basically if you want to add anything to Gary's list, do so. If you want to strike anything from Gary's list, and this is kind of what we were talking about before, and I thought this item was completed, so maybe I'm wrong, I'm sorry. But if you want to strike anything, I would say that now's the time to do that if there's anything that you see that you don't want on there. Because we are giving this content to our consultant who's building the website. So the last thing I want to do is give them something and then you guys say we didn't want that there. In the interest of complete transparency, what Gary has asked for, from my opinion, just as a district official, I think it's completely appropriate to have this on our website.
Well, short of the mission statement.
Yeah, we can't give you what we don't have yet. So.
And the bylaws.
But at least they'll know it's coming.
Yeah. Is everybody comfortable with what's on the list? Does anybody see anything they want to add?
No.
I can't imagine subtracting anything. I think we're all in
You can
agreement.
deny, but it's just putting it out there. So
No,
you can go either way.
I understand. I think we're all in agreement that put it in as he's listed it. It's really good. Is there anything else we'd like to see on the agenda, or is that complete items we'd like to see?
That's good.
Have the list, the agenda? Okay. All right, do we have any announcements? Seeing none, I think we're ready to adjourn. Everybody in agreement, ready to adjourn?
Yes, please.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I got to see what that looks like.
I leave it packed to go to Idaho for a week.
Good one. See ya.
Figure that out, right? So.
The only thing,
Will you come back as our parliamentarian, please?
Being
We
FFAers, we get
I
the-
know. Well, no, I never. We are school. We are an all-girls Catholic high school. We even have animals. But yeah, because I rely so optimists on our parliament.
Yes, first chair.
And he's a lawyer too, so he can
Real
give
quick.
us a legal opinion.
You had,
It's not a legislative action or anything like that.
nice seeing you.
Bye. Oh, you're very welcome.